Hello, COMPX519. I'm going to do a quick run through of the installation and setup of the VMs that you need to use for the labs in this paper. We're going to need two VMs, a Linux monitoring VM, which I'm going to use Remnux for. Remnux is a pre-done VM image that has all the tools we're going to need, and it only requires a couple of lines of configuration to be ready. And for Windows, we're going to use Flare VM, which is actually just a install script, I guess. So we're still going to need to make a Windows 10 VM first, and then we're going to run the installation for Flare VM on that Windows 10 VM, and that will install all the tools that we'll need. I'm doing this on a Linux host. This is my own PC. This isn't a lab computer. The lab computers, at least at the time of recording, don't allow us to, or don't support the things that we need to set up VMs on them. They don't have enough storage space primarily. You are going to need about 60 to 70 gigs minimum of free space on whatever computer you do this on. So make sure you have that available. First, I'll go through installing and setting up Remnux. So Remnux is a toolkit kind of similar to Kali. If we go to the distro tab and then download the VirtualBox OVA, you can download it from here. I already have it. So once you do have it, then we can go to import appliance. This is because it's a VirtualBox image, so it's not a ISO that requires setting up a new machine. We're basically importing an already existing one. Already has its settings. If you want to change these, you can, but it's not really going to be doing a whole lot. This machine is only really going to be responsible for running inetsim and maybe a couple of other things, so it doesn't need a whole lot of resources. It might take a little bit of time to import, so we'll just give it some space while it finishes importing. Once your Remnux machine has finished importing, we can boot it up and take a look at it. Right, so Remnux is a malware analysis Ubuntu install, kind of similar to something like Kali, where Kali is more for pen testing and Remnux is for malware analysis. It has all the tools that we're going to need, the main one basically just being inetsim. And so we don't need to install anything. It doesn't have Gedit, so if you do want to install Gedit, then you should do that first, because the next step we're going to go into is configuring it to be on a host-only network, and so we won't be able to access the greater internet. If we try now, we're able to ping a remote server, but after we change these next steps, we will no longer be able to. So first, we need to shut off the machine, and then we want to go into the network manager here, and we need to create a new network adapter. It's going to automatically assign an IP address. The lab document PDF says that we should be using a network.1, and then the machines are .100 and .50. That's not supported without changing some VirtualBox configuration, so we're just going to leave it as 56.1. Then go into the settings for your Remnux machine and change over to be a host-only adapter, and it should automatically select the network adapter that we just created. At this point, we can boot it back up again, and we're going to need to give it an IP address.
So if we run the ifconfig command at the moment, we don't have a configured IPv4 address. And now that we swap to host only adapter, we should not be able to ping outside networks. So the network configuration has changed. It's no longer, there's no longer an interfaces file in here. Instead, we want to be editing the file in /etc/netplan. We want to be editing this YAML file. I'm going to use Vim because I know how it works. You need to do it with sudo privileges, and then we're editing this. So this is our adapter, and what we just want to do is add an address. Actually, it's an addresses, and then we give this. I'm going to give this 5.6.2, and I'm going to give the Windows machine 5.6.3. So once we have that, we can save and quit, and then we can go sudo netplan apply. And then this will take a little bit of time, but after it's done, we should have a IP address. Cool. The next thing we need to do is we need to configure inetsim. So that is in inetsim/inetsim.conf. So I need to do a few things. I believe you probably want to uncomment the DNS service, and then I don't think you need anything else here. We need a service bind address, and we need to give that the IP address that we just created. We also need a DNS address of that, and then is there anything else we need to do? Nope, I think that's all. Cool, so we can quit that, and then now if we run inetsim, and we can see that it should have bound to our IP address somewhere. Maybe it doesn't print that out anymore. Oh no, there we go. Sweet, cool. So that's all the configuration we need to do on the Ubuntu side of things. I'm going to leave this running. You don't have to, but I am. And we're now going to go over to the Windows side of things. For the Windows install, we're going to need to download the Windows 10 ISO. On Linux, that's easier than on Windows. We can just go to the download page, select edition, select a language, and then download the 64-bit edition here. If you're doing this on a Windows host, then you'll need to come to the same place, but you'll have to download the network and sharing. No, you have to download the media creation tool. The media creation tool will then run you through some steps, and eventually you'll be asked whether you want to download an ISO, and you do. But I believe another limitation here is that you are only able to download editions of Windows that you have installed on your PC. So if you have Windows 10 Home or maybe Education, you probably won't be able to download Windows 10 Pro. and Pro is what I'm going to be using for the Windows machine here, just because it makes it a little bit easier to do some things. But Home is still fine. You can still get away with using the Home edition. So once you've downloaded the ISO through the media creation tool or through the Linux, through the ISO download, then we can create a new machine here. I'll call it 519 Windows 10, and then we need an ISO. I've already got it downloaded here. I don't like using unattended installation. It's caused me issues with Linux machines. I'm not sure what it does with Windows machines, but I'm just going to turn it off anyway. Give it some RAM and some CPU cores. It doesn't have to be 8 gigs, but I've got enough space for it. I'm going to make it 60 gigs, but I believe it's only going to use around 30-ish. Then we've got to go through the Windows installation process, which is reasonably lengthy. We can just click I don't have a product key and it will still allow us to install it. I'm going to use Windows 10 Pro, but again, I think you can do everything with Home as well. Custom install, and then your virtual hard drive should show up there. This stage of the process will take quite a while, and your VM may restart a couple of times before you get to the next stage where user input is required. Now that it's finished installing, we can just go through the setup. None of this particularly matters. Oh, I did not mean to click that. Skip that. We'll just go for personal use, and then we'll go with an offline account. Microsoft really doesn't want you to use an offline account, and they will try and convince you so many times that you should really use an offline account. Give it a name. I'm not going to bother giving it a password. Don't need any of that stuff either. Don't need Cortana. Awesome. So now we have our Windows machine and we can get to configuring that. So we're going to use Flare VM. Eventually Microsoft will actually let you use the web browser. Flare VM is a basically bunch of tools, and there's a PowerShell script that will install it. There's a few things that we need to do first though, so that they recommend disabling a bunch of things here. There's some pretty useful how-tos, and this script here is really good at disabling Windows Defender so that it doesn't turn on every time you restart it. This is pretty thorough. I'm not going to run through it. It does take a while. Make sure that you do the unblock file and the set execution policy unrestricted. You want to do that for both the installation script here, as well as if you use the script to disable Windows Defender, you'll want to unblock that as well. Once you have done all of that, well, once you're at this point of having a fresh machine, it might be worth actually taking a snapshot. So you can do that by going to VirtualBox and going to the snapshots, and then you can just take a new snapshot. We'll call this like clean state or something. That just means that you can restore to it at any point. Having the clean state is maybe useful. The most important one is that you have a clean state. That you have a snapshot after you've installed all of the tools and configured the network settings to connect to your Remnux machine, but before you actually run any of the malware on it. Once you've run some malware, if you don't have a snapshot to go back to, then you basically have to remake the machine, so it's a big waste of time. So definitely take a snapshot before you execute any malware, and that way after you run it you can restore it and then run it again or run some other malware and observe how that works. Our next setup here is to similarly configure this to connect to our Remnux machine only, and not to connect to, so it doesn't have access to the greater internet. So if we power this one down and then go into its network settings, we can put that to host only network adapter. It should select the same one. We can then boot it up and change the IP address and gateway settings to connect to our Remnux machine. Once we're back in Windows, we want to have a look for good old control panel. Go to network and internet, network and sharing, and then configure or change adapter settings when it gets there eventually. Change adapter settings, and then we can go to the properties. And we want to go to the IPv4 and go to properties there. We now want to give this one a IP address, so I'm going to give it 192.168.56.3. Our Remnux machine is .2. Should automatically figure out it's /24, or decide it's /24. And the gateway, this needs to be the IP address of our Remnux machine. So I gave that 2. I can confirm that over here. 56.2, 56.2, and then we want the same thing here. So now if we open up our command prompt, and that also just clicked yes, well, that was great. It'll pop a thing asking if you want it to be discoverable. I don't think it's particularly important, but I just clicked yes. If we open command prompt now, we should be able to ping our Remnux machine. And we should also be able to ping other websites. So if we did, for example, that should return to us. But as you see, it's resolving back to our Remnux machine. So that's what iNetSim is doing for us over here. If we open up a web page and we try to go to a website, so ycato.ac.nz is just going to, it's going to load, but it's going to load the iNetSim page. And if we try to download something like that, it will download the file. And if we went something like, right, so at this point, this is where we would maybe take another snapshot of our Windows machine. Since the Windows machine is the only one that's going to be changing, the Remnux machine, we don't really do anything with it. It's just for monitoring, so you don't have to worry too much about that. So we just take another snapshot here. Let's take another one and say fully configured. I'm assuming that you've already got an installed Flare VM and all that stuff before you've done this. And then now we can put some malware on there, run it, do what we need to do for the assignment. At any point where we want to start again or testing again, we can restore back to this fully configured. We can't do that while the machine's running. And then we could go again. Hopefully that answers most of your questions. If you have any others, then I guess send me an email. Worth to note, but I don't think I can ping the Windows machine from here. Not entirely sure where that is, but it doesn't seem to matter. Cool. Hope that helps.